Michelle von Emster's body was found on the morning of April 15, 1994, off the coast of San Diego, California. Her cause of death was initially marked as unknown, but due to her right leg being missing from the thigh down, a shark was soon speculated to have caused her death. But the circumstances around the case have led to different theories as to what else may have happened to Michelle on the night of April 14th and hinted at possible foul play being involved. Michelle was born in 1968 and had always been a local to California. She grew up in San Carlos, which is located close to San Francisco, and was part of a big family of 5 girls. After graduating from Notre Dame High School in 1986, Michelle went on to study at St. Mary's College. Things took an unexpected turn for Michelle, however, when she was diagnosed with cancer, but thankfully, Michelle battled the disease and was given the all-clear a year later. Celebrations were in order, and Michelle did just that by renting out a house in Loma Portal, a scenic area that overlooks San Diego Bay. Michelle soon decided that she was longing for a change and left her comfortable Loma Portal home for something that most would consider a rather disenchanting shared home at 4999 Muir Avenue in Ocean Beach. It was an area that some referred to as eclectic and bohemian, but others simply judged it by area's higher than average crime rate. But for Michelle, only one thing mattered. It was close to the ocean. Michelle was best described as a free spirit. It was around this time that she got a butterfly tattoo on her right shoulder. Little did Michelle know at the time that in years to come, this tattoo would help investigators identify her body. Michelle was last seen in San Diego on April 14th at roughly 8 p.m. when her friend and roommate Coco Campbell had dropped her off at the pier located 6 blocks away from their home, at Michelle's request. At the time, she had been wearing a green trench coat, and she had her purse with her. The pair had been planning to attend a Pink Floyd concert that night, but when they arrived at the venue, they found out they had accidentally purchased the wrong tickets and weren't allowed to attend. Obviously, this was disappointing, and the girls started the driveway home, and while on the way, Michelle had asked Coco to drop her off. Coco later recalled that her friends seemed to be in a weird mood that day. Michelle didn't come home that evening. What happened after this has remained largely a mystery, but we do note this was the last time any one of her friends or family saw her alive. Curiously, Michelle's purse was found the following day along a busy stretch of beach over 2 miles away from where Michelle's body was found. In the early morning hours of April 15th, something caught the attention of 20-year-old surfer David Correa. A group of seagulls appeared to be standing on the beach. About 6 of these scavengers were pecking away at something that was floating just beyond the break. Naturally, David was curious to see what the birds had found and called out to the only surfer who was close by. This happened to be William Dostal, who lived in Michelle's old neighborhood of Loma Portal. William was closer than David to whatever was floating in the water, so he paddled over and the birds scattered. This is when William first laid eyes on Michelle's naked, torn-up body, and the surfers immediately paddled back to shore to alert the authorities of what they had found. Michelle's body was recovered later that day by 2 rescue boats. She was found floating face down in a kelp bed a few hundred yards from the coastline. Although she was naked, Michelle still had her bracelets and rings on. Her butterfly tattoo was clear on her right shoulder. Keep in mind, at this stage, authorities didn't know who this young woman was, and since there was such clear and obvious trauma on her body, she was taken back to be looked over by the medical examiner. Robert Engel was the man in charge of performing this task, and he initially examined Michelle's body on the deck of Rescue 1. This report noted large tearing-type wounds with missing tissue on the body. The majority of Michelle's right leg was missing, and Robert determined that she had not been in the water for long. This report does not include a specific cause of death. Everyone involved did assume that a shark or more had probably mauled Michelle. Michelle's official autopsy was done on April 16th by San Diego medical examiner Brian Blackburn. Her injuries now painted a very different picture of what her last moments had looked like. Michelle's face had scrapes and bruises all over it, and her neck was broken. Her right leg had been severed mid-thigh. Her buttocks had been completely mangled, and her arms and remaining leg didn't escape the same fate, also exhibiting shredded tissue and exposed bone. Some of her ribs had been broken or fractured, and her pelvis was broken. Michelle had bled internally, and she had sand in her mouth, throat, lungs, and stomach. This indicated to Brian Blackburn that Michelle was alive when she had received these injuries and then drowned. Despite all of this information, they still didn't know who this woman was and how she had ended up like she had. He did feel confident enough to conclude that the woman had died as a result of a great white shark attack, and the blue sharks had then scavenged on her body. This assessment was made despite never having done an autopsy on a shark attack victim before. This would be heavily questioned by experts in the field. It wouldn't be long until the name Michelle von Emster was linked to the body found floating along the coast. Denise Knox remembers watching the 10 o'clock news on the evening of April 16th, when an unidentified body of a woman with a butterfly tattoo was mentioned. Michelle had worked at Denise's shop, Cabrillo Stationery and Office Supply, and she happened to fit the exact description of this woman that had been found. Michelle also hadn't arrived at work on Friday or Saturday. Denise phoned the police straight away, and she was put through to the medical examiner's office. Apparently, various fake calls had already come in. After half an hour of talking with the coroner, Denise mentioned something that no one else could have known. She told the coroner that Michelle didn't shave her underarms or legs. Upon hearing that, she was asked to come in and make an identification. Denise and her shop manager made the drive and arrived shortly after midnight. Denise was shown a Polaroid image of the woman's face, and she recognized it as belonging to Michelle von Emster immediately. Naturally, once the news broke, the headlines were littered with white shark for the following weeks, as well as different accounts from those who knew Michelle. Bizarrely, she was depicted in two very conflicting lights depending on whose account you choose to believe. Some say she was a hippie, while others said she was a hard party girl. Some said she meditated by the ocean every day, while others said she was scared of it. Regardless of all that, one thing that was indisputable was Michelle's love for the ocean. Once people started hearing more about the case, interest started to grow and questions started being asked. This happened to coincide with the investigation having pretty much been wrapped up. So was it all that simple? Did Michelle fall victim to an opportunistic great white shark and drown in the aftermath of the attack? Local law enforcement and the medical examiner believed so, but shark experts and behaviorists began to weigh in, and it raised some serious questions as to what had really happened to Michelle. After these questions were raised, Brian Blackburn had asked, if it wasn't a white shark, then what was it? And this seems to be the question that always resurfaces. What else could have inflicted such damage to Michelle's body? On April 18th, a shark expert named Ralph Collier was quoted in the San Diego Union Tribune, basically confirming the shark attack presumption, based off of the preliminary reports. That opinion very much changed when he saw Michelle's actual remains, in particular, her leg bone. One of the things that struck me was the condition of the limb, Ralph told author Dave Good in 2013. When a white shark bites off part of a limb, the break is clean, almost like you put it on a table saw. What remained of Michelle's femur was anything but. It looked like what happens when you get a piece of bamboo and whittle it down to a point with a knife. The bone came to a point. This type of injury is caused when a bone is twisted under a great deal of force. He used a boat's propeller as an example of something that could have caused an injury like that, but he was certain it was not from a shark. I've looked at close to 100 photos of cases that I've reviewed over the years, and I've never seen any bones that came to a point. Ralph Collier isn't just any shark fanatic. He is internationally recognized as the leading authority on Pacific Coast great white shark behavior and ecology, as well as the founder of the Shark Research Committee. That wasn't the only thing that Ralph pointed out to Dave. Sand was found in her mouth, in her throat, in her nasal passages, her lungs, and in her stomach. For all this to have happened in accordance with the autopsy findings, the shark would have had to have grabbed Michelle and pushed her face first into the ocean bottom in order for her to have ingested all this material. Ralph went on to explain that this isn't something that sharks do. Michelle had to have been alive for this sand to have gotten into her lungs and stomach, and if her leg was bitten off by a shark, she would have bled out in seconds. So, what are the possibilities as to what happened to Michelle? Let's exclude the shark attack theory, as solid evidence has been given as to why she wasn't a victim of a shark. The first theory is that Michelle went out to swim naked that night. This is something that an acquaintance who will come up shortly had mentioned she had done before, and drowned. She may have been caught in a current and ended up being thrown against the rocks located along the shoreline, which would explain her broken bones. If she wasn't dead at this point, she may have been knocked unconscious and then drowned, and this is when her body was feasted on by scavenging blue sharks. But there are facts that point against this theory. The water temperature was said to have been around 15 degrees Celsius or 59 degrees Fahrenheit that night. Hardly an inviting temperature for a midnight dip in the ocean. It was also high tide in the evening, and it was cloudy, so the moon wasn't even out to give any light. The second theory suggests that Michelle fell from Sunset Cliffs and died. The water at the base of Sunset Cliffs lies 400 feet below, so a fall from this height would undoubtedly cause incredible damage to someone. These peaks are a popular sightseeing spot in San Diego, where people come to watch the sunset on the edge of the Golden Cliffs. These Golden Cliffs got their color from the soft sandstone that they are made from, which has been known to collapse and cause deaths in the past. The third theory is that Michelle was murdered. Something that supports the theory of someone being involved in Michelle's death is the facts surrounding her purse. Michelle's purse was found on April 15th by a couple at around 11 p.m. at the base of a seawall about 2.5 miles from where Michelle was found. When the purse was turned in to authorities, the following items were found: Michelle's keys, her driver's license, makeup, and an uncashed paycheck, and $27 in cash. You may be wondering why this points at someone being involved in Michelle's death. Couldn't she have just left it there herself? Well, the stretch of beach that the purse was found at is very popular, meaning that it would be unlikely it would be a whole 24 hours with no one having noticed it. In other words, someone left her purse there well after Michelle had gone into the water. Now, if Michelle was murdered, who was responsible? Theorists have pointed out two unofficial suspects in the case. The first one being Edwin Decker, the acquaintance I mentioned earlier. Michelle and Edwin met while she was working at her previous job before Cabrillo Stationery and Office Supply, which was at Rumor's coffee shop. Michelle had actually left this job due to harassment from a stalker. She left the job hoping she would be left alone. Michelle didn't know who this stalker was. She only knew he rode a motorcycle. Edwin was a writer and bartender who worked near Rumor's. He claimed that he and Michelle were fairly close. They apparently met in February of 1994. Edwin admitted to being attracted to Michelle and said he asked her out in April, and Michelle said yes to going out. The two happened to go out for a drink on April 13th and apparently went back to Edwin's apartment at around midnight, where the two had some sort of sexual relations. Michelle left at 5 a.m. on April 14th with a hangover via taxi. Remember what I mentioned earlier about him saying Michelle liked to swim naked? Well, this is something he only said after having learnt of her death and something no one else has ever claimed. This strikes me as rather convenient given how Michelle was found. The fact that he also had some sort of romantic encounter with Michelle right before she died is also suspicious, and the fact that Michelle was in a strange mood that day, which happened to be after she spent the night with Edwin. Edwin never contacted the police even when he saw Michelle's name in the papers. Police did get in touch with him at the time, though, and he had the following to say of their relationship. There was a total intellectual connection. I felt there was an emotional connection, too. At least on my part there was. And we also had a physical connection. Another thing that doesn't do Edwin any favors is the poem he wrote after finding out Michelle had died, titled Shark Attack. The report said there was a tattoo, a butterfly on her shoulder, which I remembered that night on my couch when I, like the shark, chewed on her lip and took off her shirt. But in June of 2008, Edwin did help an investigator write a letter to the San Diego Medical Examiner to request that Michelle's case be reevaluated. Despite the evidence regarding the shark attack likelihood, no changes were made to Michelle's official file. The second potential suspect is, of course, the stalker. We know Michelle had left her job to try to get away from this person, but what if this hadn't been enough? Denise Knox actually came forward to police years later and said she recalled a day at the store after Michelle had died, when a man came in and started to print copies of her autopsy report. She didn't know who he was or how he had gotten hold of the report, but this man apparently continued to come back into the store and print more copies. One day, Denise kept a copy for herself, and on the bottom corner of one of the pages was "Blue Sharks Bullshit," had been scribbled by the man. Denise told the San Diego Reader that he drove a motorcycle. There is one final theory I need to mention, and that is that Michelle jumped from Sunset Cliffs that night. This theory is widely believed by Michelle's family. Teresa, her younger sister, wrote an article titled "The Roman Catholic Church Raped My Family," in which she details the abuse herself, another sister, and Michelle in particular endured under Father Greg Ingalls. Michelle was groomed by Ingalls before ultimately being raped by the man in her family home. He then left the home and returned hours later to have dinner with the family. The emotional damage that would have inflicted on a young girl would have been unimaginable. But as is so common with pedophiles, when the girl's parents went to the man after having heard of the girl's complaints, he knew all the right things to say in order to charm his way out of the allegations. Teresa says while they believe he only raped Michelle once, it was enough to completely turn everything upside down for her. Michelle was understandably incredibly angry at her parents for taking Ingalls' side, and that led to her constantly picking fights with them. Teresa says Michelle started to battle with alcoholism while at St. Mary's College, and it was also around this time that she started smoking marijuana and was exposed to cocaine. Teresa revealed in this article that Michelle actually dropped out of St. Mary's before she received her cancer diagnosis and tried her hand at beauty school. Once she got the all clear after her cancer diagnosis, Michelle, Teresa says, she reverted back to her old hippie ways. But her parents had a strict rule for Michelle. She either stayed off the drugs or she stayed away. As Teresa put it, she stayed away. Michelle's sister reveals that she then developed a heroin habit. They also believe she was robbed at gunpoint and raped again. Teresa remembers that it was a sunny April day in 1994 when her uncle knocked on the door. He was there to tell her parents that Michelle's body had been found floating in the ocean. Although devastated by her death, we are happy Michelle finally has peace. Peace that was stolen from her at the age of 15 by Father Greg Ingalls. Peace my family still doesn't have, Teresa wrote. Was Michelle's death an accident? Was it suicide? Or did someone have something to do with her ending up in the water? This is one of those cases that it seems any conclusion still has certain questions left unanswered.